Hello, Nick here, obviously. Thought I'd just jump on and react to this shocking story about Reform UK and Rupert Lowe. I haven't done one of these for a while. I used to do these reactions to things like the Trump assassination attempt, then I stopped for no real reason, thinking it had to be like video or something, talked myself out of it for nonsense reasons, as I sometimes do, but now I'm back, and I really want to talk about this because it's really bothered me, obviously, because it's pretty important. And Rupert Lowe was the only mainstream MP that seemed to really just speak the truth to me. It just, no caveats, no being too careful, just straight down the line, here it is. And he's the only person that would get up and do things like raise a series of difficult questions about the grooming gangs in the House of Commons. Who else is doing that? While all the Lib MPs had pathetic meltdowns and Rupert just refused to give way and said, no, I think I'll carry on, thank you very much, and just kind of, that's exactly what we need. That's the kind of energy we need in our politics. And it was almost too good to be true, wasn't it? You get this guy, every tweet is a banger. You're just like, this is my guy. He's saying everything we want. He's just speaking plainly, telling the truth, saying the things that we want to hear, talking about the issues that bother many people who will be on this channel and just normal people throughout the country. But you almost thought, yeah, it's too good to be true because our progressive elite don't want that. They can't handle the truth, to quote Jack Nicholson, because they're on their last legs. They're completely out of touch. They're unable or unwilling, probably both, to solve the problems in our country, whether it's immigration or anything else, pretty much. And it's the same throughout Europe, although Europe has had some change, some parties getting in, though there's been attempts, of course, to block them, the AfD, for example, National Rally. But this is the energy across the West. You've got Trump, who did manage to get in America and create this kind of counter-elite, and that energy's there in many countries. There's an attempt to block it, of course. So when Rupert Lowe comes along, just saying the things we all want to hear, which is just normal statement, but it's just so strange to hear a politician just tell the truth about the things that are bothering the people. And that's how broken our politics is and how out of touch our elites are with the country. And that can only last for so long before it collapses, in my opinion. But you did feel like, oh, is this a new movement, or is this too good to be true? And I knew he'd run into problems, Rupert Lowe, particularly because, and many people predicted this, you didn't have to be a genius to see that he was going to have a clash with Farage because he was getting too big. Elon Musk criticized Farage and praised Rupert Lowe. That was always going to be an issue. And I'm going to be really fair for a second, perhaps too fair, given how they've treated Rupert. And just say, yes, I understand if you're Farage and you are the one that's led this movement with your name recognition, your charisma and communication skills and so on. I mean, Farage is someone where you could do one of these vox pops in the street and many people will actually know who it is. You know, when you do these vox pops and you find that a lot of people on the street don't even know who the Prime Minister is, you know, your average youth, and you just think, wow, like you're spending your life talking about politics and most people have zero clue what's going on. But Farage is someone who many people will recognise. He obviously transcends politics. He's got all the young people on board with TikTok and so on. There was a piece just yesterday about how young people are getting on board with reform in the 18 to 24 demographic. So I accept all that, and I accept that if you're Farage, you might think, hang on, I've done all this, you ungrateful buggers. You could feel like that. However, Rupert Lowe was seen by many as the kind of heart of the party and one of the big reasons they were backing reform. And we see how well reform have been doing in the polls. And it felt like all you had to do was carry on that energy, and now they've completely spaffed it. This is how many people feel, including me. I mean, I did vote for reform. My vote doesn't do an awful lot in my area, where Labour win a massive victory, followed by the Greens. Imagine that. But nonetheless, I voted for them. Would I vote for them if they kicked out Rupert Lowe? Absolutely not. And I don't think this would be a purity spiral in any way, by the way. This would be a completely reasonable position. But before I get too ahead of myself, let me just look at what happened. So Rupert Lowe did this interview with Andrew Pearce at the Mail, and he did say some things. He said it's too early to know whether Nigel will deliver the goods. He can only deliver if he surrounds himself with the right people. There's a hint. Meaning stop alienating people like him and presumably Ben Habib. Nigel is a fiercely independent individual and is extremely good at what we have done so far. He has got messianic qualities. Will those messianic qualities distill into sage leadership? I don't know. So yes, this was quite controversial. He also said we have to change from being a protest party led by the Messiah into being a properly structured party with a front bench, which we don't have. We have to start behaving as if we are leading and not merely protesting. There you go. So it was pretty scathing, and you can see why this wasn't going to go down well. But this is clearly the culmination of months and months of frustration. We can see now from all the things Rupert is tweeting that this is like a kind of last resort, which is also what happened with Ben Habib. So the reason I say I couldn't vote for them if they got rid of Rupert Lowe, I mean, people will say, is that purity spiraling? Not really, because I carried on supporting them after Ben Habib left, even though I like Ben. He was on this channel, we did a podcast interview, because some of the things he was saying were pretty outrageous in terms of staying in a party. You can't constantly criticize it and stay within it. I now see that he'd done all that privately and only gone to the media as a kind of last resort, which I do understand. But he wasn't an MP, he didn't win his seat, so I was prepared to say, okay, that's not great, it's not good, and I made my feelings clear on it, but could probably still just about support them. With Rupert Lowe now as well, there's no chance, because he, as I say, he was one of the very few, if not the only mainstream politician. Some of the other Reform MPs would get it right, hit and miss at times, whereas Rupert Lowe nailed it on absolutely everything. The only thing, in fact, I've ever disagreed with him on was assisted dying, but he then changed his view on that because he saw how bad the bill was, and so then we agreed. So, not that anyone cares, about me particularly, but what else are you going to do? You're going to look at it from your own lens of who you agree with, and who you want to represent you. That's what politics is. So, anyway, and I'm sure you've seen, but they put out this absurd statement. So he does this interview with Andrew Pearce. The next day, this statement comes out from Reform UK from Zia Youssef and Lee Anderson, and it's all this stuff about bullying, and it just sounds immediately like nonsense. Of course, we don't know for sure, but evidence was provided to us of workplace bullying, the targeting of female staff who raised concerns, evidence of derogatory and discriminatory remarks made about women. It doesn't even necessarily say from Rupert Lowe. It says the serious bullying in the offices of the Member of Parliament for Great Yarmouth, Rupert Lowe. So it's a very slimy statement. It comes out immediately after this controversial interview and after Farage has retaliated and dissed Rupert Lowe on media channels, and you just go, very suspect. Some people say, no, this has been brewing for months, but then it was reported that there was only a complaint made to the police on the day this statement came out, even though this incident goes back to December. Anyway, Rupert Lowe has, of course, repeatedly and robustly denied all allegations. He's even said that the lawyers acted too soon. The lawyers say that Reform have acted too soon, and that's coming from the Reform lawyers. So that's a strange one. He says here, important, the independent lawyer KC, instructed by Reform, has advised me to say the following. The party was precipitous, word I managed to pause up on live TV, to state that these allegations have been made without also saying that the party has commissioned an independent investigation, and the investigation has not yet got on the way to look at all the evidence and evaluate its veracity. That tells you everything that you need to know. Very, very dodgy. So even the lawyer instructed by Reform is saying, no, they shouldn't have done this. Very, very poor form. Very, very clear what's going on. They want to get rid of Lowe. And if you think it's only a temporary thing, and they've taken away the whip, they've suspended him, you think, is this temporary while they do this investigation? But if you read what Lee Anderson has written, he basically speaks as if they are just getting rid of Rupert Lowe. He almost says it. He says that the party can't function with him there. He says, but his unwillingness, meaning Rupert's, to cooperate in an investigation into his behaviour has meant the parliamentary party cannot function effectively whilst Rupert is a Reform UK MP. Now, you could argue that means temporarily. That's why they've had to suspend him, because it can't function while he's there. But it very much feels like they're just kicking him out, which is, if they are, is completely insane, because he was such a key part of this movement and this party. And many people saying they've just ruined this momentum they had, and they've just spaffed it all away. And I very much feel that. I mean, they were topping all kinds of polls, or getting close, and in some cases actually topping Labour. And it's almost as if it's only 5 MPs. It's such an incredible thing for them to have that much momentum, given how nascent they are as a party, right? But such is the energy on that side of politics, and such is the dearth of representation for so many people in the country. As I mentioned earlier, the political elite, as you know if you listen to this, is completely out of touch. So they fill that gap. So it wasn't actually that hard in a way. You just needed someone to fill the gap, and of course they've done a good job. Farage is obviously a great campaigner and so on, but they just had to keep it going. They were a little bit shaky on the Ukraine issue, but I don't really blame them for that, because I think there's a lot of mad stuff about the Ukraine issue, and I don't think Farage is that wrong to sort of try and balance things and worry about what Trump will think and try and be diplomatic. I think the jingoism about Ukraine is kind of insane, so I didn't mind that. Maybe they lost a bit of ground there among the normie voters, but this to me is unforgivable. And people will say, "Oh yeah, you're just purity spiraling," as I've said, but I'm not, because I carried on voting. I would have carried on voting for them with Ben Habib even removed. Maybe that was wrong, but this is a step too far. You get rid of one of your best MPs if that's what they are doing. And people talk about Farage being the CEO of the company and how he has too much control. I don't even mind that if it was run well. And run well here means keeping your best talent. I remember me reading Felix Dennis on this. He started Maxim magazine and all these things. He used to work with Neil Tennant of the Pet Shop Boys, later of the Pet Shop Boys, and his whole thing was just find talent, pay them properly. It's a bit different with the political party when it comes to payment, but that was his whole thing with running a company. When you have talent like Rupert Lowe, you just keep them. Of course, and they might not be completely in line. I just wrote a piece on my Substack about talent in an age of conformity. This could be another example. I'm sure Rupert hasn't done all these things, but I wouldn't be that surprised if some people find him somewhat disagreeable, because they may or may not. I could be completely wrong, but let's just hypothetically say, to get up in the House of Commons and go against the liberal elite and be very bold about it, it requires a certain tenacity and personality, and it requires you being willing to put some backs up, and that's going to be a certain sort of character type, and you're unlikely to toe the line, therefore. And this is a problem you have with people on the right, of course, who are not careerist politicians, who are just doing it because they are worried about the country, which applies to Rupert Lowe. He's got enough money on his own, similar to Ben Habib, didn't need to do it. He's just worried about the country. And someone like that, they're in it for the right reasons, so they're guided by principle, and they're also, by their nature, likely to be possibly somewhat disagreeable people. When I say disagreeable, I don't mean bad people. I mean high in what Jordan Peterson would call high in disagreeableness. And they may not even be. They may have just been pushed to it by the state of our country. But if you're prepared to put yourself out there and campaign and get up and talk about rape gangs to the clueless politicians and corrupt politicians, or well, corrupt, I mean kind of complicit in a sense by ignoring things like groom gangs in the House of Commons, then you've got to have something about you. And I said on the telly that surely Reform UK worship Churchill. They worship Thatcher, but I'm sure they love Churchill. He's the kind of person they'd constantly, have pictures of Churchill. It's just that kind of party, isn't it? But Churchill wouldn't last a day in a party like this, because you look at that statement, it's all very Weasley, it's all very HR. Oh, we've had allegations of, and you're just like, have you though? Workplace bullying. I mean, there is workplace bullying. I've suffered it. But I tell you what, you could argue, but I tell you what, in a culture where throwing some baby tomatoes across a room, if you remember that story, if that's workplace bullying, then everything is, So even if Rupert Lowe hadn't just strenuously denied these, as soon as I saw it, before I'd even seen his denial, I was like, this is nonsense. Because of the timing and because of the culture we're in. And it was just too convenient. Oh, he makes these statements, this comes out. Now, was he wrong to make those statements? It certainly wasn't you could say, the most tactful thing to do, to come out and say that Farage is too messianic and it's a protest party, and I'm not sure, it's too early to know whether Nigel will deliver the goods. I mean, you could say that he's cruising for a bruising with that, but of course that only comes, we now learn, after months of trying to call for meetings. Rupert Lowe was trying to have meetings, trying to have communication, and he sounds like he's just been ignored and sidelined. So this is a sort of last resort. So yeah, I mean, those statements were always going to get him in trouble, but to react like this and immediately just oust him like this, very, very dodgy, very, very disreputable stuff, very slimy, Weasley stuff. Don't like it at all. And who's behind it? It seems to be Zia Youssef. But what do we know about Zia Youssef? We don't know anything about him. He's popped up. He suddenly controls the party along with Farage. You just go, who is this guy? And is that why Farage suddenly was very, very soft on this sort of Islamification of Britain in that interview with Winston Marshall, I think it was. He was just very, very strange about that. He basically talked about it as sort of inevitable. It would just be an Islamic country. Slight exaggeration, but it was almost what he was saying. And you go, hang on, that's a bit much for a Reform UK, isn't it? And people have remarked many times throughout the last weeks and months about Farage being unnecessarily moderate or unnecessarily to the left or to the centre, whatever you want to call it. Because even Jenrick, as I pointed out in an article, was outflanking him on the right, Robert Jenrick. And you go, what's he doing here? Like, I understand you have to play the game a bit if you're in his position, but this is too much. And you just go, so Rupert Lowe says the things I agree with, Farage says the things that are increasingly questionable, and then they get rid of Rupert Lowe. You just go, well, I have to draw the line there, you know. You've got to draw the line somewhere. Some people are like, no, this is the only chance to reform. This is our chance to destroy the Uniparty. It's like, but this just is shaping up as part of the Uniparty if they do things like this. There is a line. It's like, no, you've got to vote for the party that has none of your beliefs anymore and punishes someone who does have your beliefs. It's like, no thanks. Why would I do that? It's ridiculous. So it's not a purity spout. It's just there's a gap there. If they're too pussy to fill it, basically, you know, pardon my language, but that's where we're at. If they're too cowardly to do it, or can't do it, or won't do it, then someone else will. You know, maybe it'll be Dominic Cummings working with Rupert Lowe. Who knows? But that gap remains. And it's not clear that Reform will be the ones to fill it. They might just be the first attempt. We have to wait and see. That's not going away. The feeling in this country after 1 million net migration, you know, after thousands of girls raped and tortured for years and years and ongoing in so many towns and covered up by authorities. None of this is going away. And many other problems, of course, housing, cost of living, anything you want to cite, general decline of the country, none of this feeling is going away. So there'll be another party. I'm not worried. Well, of course, it's all a long shot. It's all difficult. But I'm not going to stick with a party that behaves like this. And I don't really believe in this endless moderation of your message thing either. If you look at elite theory and things like this, and if you look at reality, look at Lenin or whoever you want to cite, New Labour, people get in with incredibly radical ideas. New Labour is an incredibly radical project. And we're all sort of tricked into thinking it's not. And somehow they're the moderates or something. They're this like centre-left or something. But they're incredibly radical, as Peter Hitchens has often pointed out. Listen to Fraser Nelson. He's your kind of moderate. Is he? He's saying that English people don't exist. The Englishness doesn't exist. Like basically anyone can be English. Obviously Rishi Sunak is not English. I said the other day, he seems like a nice guy. I appreciate his contribution towards destroying the Tory party. But he's not English. And it's pretty obvious. If I was born and raised in India, no one would say I was Indian. 0 people would say I was Indian. They'd be like, oh, that guy, maybe his dad was in the military or finance or something. Or, you know, I wouldn't be Indian. So Rishi Sunak's not English. It's just a fact. You know, but it's when you're claiming he is, your position is extreme. And you're sort of denying the existence of English people. That's a very, very extreme position. So don't let them think that, con you into thinking they're the moderates. They are the extremists. Liberalism itself is an extreme concept. In this kind of liberalism has only been tried recently. This kind of post-war liberal period it's a rare and quite strange project. And you know that English thing is just one of many examples. Also, by the way, the fact that no one would say I was Indian shows that they're trying to take something away from you but give nothing. I won't get to be Indian, but Rishi Sunak is English. No, sorry. Maybe British, maybe we can talk about that, but not English. Just stuff like that, just an example that sprung to mind of like, actually, these are mad ideas that go against all common sense. And that's my point about New Labour. And the idea that you have to tack to the centre is wrong. The idea you have to be moderate, I think, is wrong. I think you just have to get in, harness a number of people and seize power as a kind of counter-elite, as Trump has done in the US. And we can go into whether that's proven to be good or not and whether you like everything he's doing, but certainly they seem to have taken over and they're doing all these executive orders and they're doing things radically differently. Now, you can do a bit more as a president with executive orders. We might struggle to do, but the point is, I don't believe in this tack into the centre, and I don't believe in the centre. Dominic Cummings talks about this. There is no real centre, and I've said it before. Look at what people believe in this country. They believe in the death penalty for multiple murder, child murder, terrorist murder. but we don't get a death penalty, do we? But that's what people believe in. People are far more anti-immigration than has ever been represented by their elected representatives. No politician has come up and said, no, we need to really stop this. And ones that have been ousted, as we see in history. So this idea of being moderate is nonsense. Really what it is that the people have one very clear view. They tend to have pretty clear views. Like they're pro-death penalty, against immigration. They like the NHS until recently when it really has gone tits up. And then they go, not sure. But they want healthcare. They have things they want. They don't all align perfectly with the current parties. They're ideologically quite often all over the map. But they have clear preferences. But these are completely ignored by our ruling elite. So the idea that it's being moderate, when people are talking about going to the centre, tacking to the centre, being moderate, moving left, they're really talking about, in my view, fitting in more with the Whitehall-Overton window. But that has no relation to an actual political spectrum or actual feeling in the country. It's just, they're just playing the game of Whitehall. But the problem is Whitehall and our elite are so out of touch with the people that is a losing game and is going to collapse at some point. IMHO. And Cummings has talked about it, will it be 2032? Will it be, can we do anything in the next election? He says vote reform tactically in these council elections and so on, but what will happen in the local elections, whatever. But long term, is it going to be them? It's not clear that they'll be the party. But this energy remains. This energy isn't going anywhere. And some will choose to go with Farage and say, yeah, I back him no matter what, and everyone else is being silly, and that's fine. And others will choose to say, no, actually, you can't just get rid of your best MP who represented the people the most. And I'm in that camp. I'm like, no, soz. But let's see, maybe he'll stay, but I don't think he will. I don't see how he can at this point, given everything they've said. And in the short term, it leaves no one to vote for, you could argue. Certainly in my area, I don't know who's going to stand here. But longer term, well, let's see. I mean, and I'm open to them getting back on track and fixing it. If they did fix it, I'd be open to that. Maybe this will age badly and they'll fix it and sort it out with Rupert Lowe. It doesn't seem very likely right now. Anyway, those are some of my thoughts on that. I think I've covered pretty much everything. Let me know what you think. Thought I'd just jump on and do another one of these because I haven't done it for a while. Hope you liked my article yesterday. Read that if you haven't. Call it Talent in an Age of Conformity. Even more relevant now. Rupert Lowe, another talented person struggling to fit in to the system. And I hope you like my recent podcast with Paul Cox. Check those out. We're doing all sorts on here. Hopefully going to do interviews again soon. I keep talking about it. I was going to try and interview Rupert Lowe. Probably a bit harder to do that right now, because everyone wants to. But let's see. Let me know your thoughts. Cheers.